I did not want to come across as someone who has been all over the place. Hi, everyone. I'm Deepika Pillai. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. I am a senior product marketeer at Indeed. Been here at Indeed for about 6 months. And yeah, glad to be here, Henry.
What got you interested in product marketing?
So I started my career in luxury hospitality, sales and marketing back in India. Spent a few years in retail marketing in Dubai. Worked for a branding agency here in the Dallas area for about a year before I launched my own e-commerce startup. When I was pivoting from my business, a headhunter actually reached out to me for this position super randomly. I had not applied for anything, but that's when I had started warming up to the idea of product marketing. Thanks to you, Henry, I've watched almost all of your videos. I feel like everything that I've done until then, sales enablement, brand marketing, branding, and of course, put in a little bit of entrepreneurship to the mix. And I feel like product marketing was the perfect crux of all of that put together. Yeah, so that's, I guess, how I stumbled upon it. And I feel like I found myself now.
How did you prepare for the product marketing interviews?
I brushed up on everything that product marketing was about. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I knew I had a lot of skills from having been in sales and in marketing for so long that I could use my skills as being very transferable to this role. Having been in sales, I understand what a salesperson would look for in terms of a marketing asset. So my sales enablement story was quite streamlined in that perspective. In terms of brand marketing and branding, I think it gave me that slightly larger, more bird's eye view perspective of how marketing is looked at. These two extremes, I would say, would really help me in chiseling my story.
What about your entrepreneur's experience?
When you're an entrepreneur, you have to own every expense and every revenue that comes in. So I think that gave me that whole P&L responsibility in a way that made me put a general manager or a business manager cap, which is the more strategic part of the product marketing function. So I think that is what helped me in really building my story as having been an entrepreneur.
During that whole process, what was the hardest part of interviewing?
I think it was my preconceived notion that a job requires you to have been doing that same thing for the past 10 years, but I did not have that. I was in sales and branding and brand marketing and entrepreneur. So I did not want to come across as someone who has been all over the place. But having listened to enough, senior level marketeers at Indeed and other tech companies especially, I feel like those are the skills that can define you if you use the nuances of what you've done in the past. So I think just finding those little nitty-gritties of what I can take from a sales role or my entrepreneurship journey, I think that was the most trickiest part of preparing myself.
Overall, what was the Indeed product marketing interview process like?
I had 3 different sets of interviews, and each of them was with a different stakeholder whom I would eventually now interact with. I prepared myself based on the designation of the people whom I was preparing with. If it was more focused on messaging, I made sure that I had my messaging skills amped up. And one was with the director of product strategy. And that was something I had to get more of my business hat on during that interview. So I feel like each of my interviews, they were able to rip open who I am.
Got it. So you had one interview with a product marketer, one with the director of product strategy, and then what was the last one?
Yeah, so the first was the director of messaging and content. The second was director of product marketing, and the third was director of product strategy.
How long were the interviews and what topics were covered in those interviews?
The conversation with each of them was more around their specialty area. So when I was speaking with the director of content and messaging, it was more around how I'm able to articulate myself and what is my storyline, not just chronologically taking someone through my skills and experience, but how do I put that across? Director of product marketing, who was my hiring manager, was more like a typical interview, which was more behavioral in nature. So that was, again, very interesting and very different for me in this process. And the third was more like a conversation where I presented my high level 30, 60, 90-day plan with whatever limited knowledge I had gathered in the first 2 interviews. I was able to put together a quick plan and look at what is it that I would like to really go in and do in the first 3 months.
When did you know you got the job?
By the second interview, I knew it. It was more conversational than like a typical interview process. Yeah, I think by the second interview, I knew it. And the third was more a very typical first time conversation with a product strategist. So, yeah.
What advice do you have for aspiring product marketers?
And I think the product marketing world is quite hot right now. Companies, especially high growth companies, are looking for good people. And I would say strong companies are open to exploring candidates who do not necessarily have typical tech product marketing experience in that industry. I think this is the time to make that move if you have been thinking about it. Especially someone like me, had not a typical tech background, not been in the US for too long, first generation immigrant. I do have global experience, but I have a very diverse overlook at everything. So I bring a very different perspective to our team and our table. I would say I think look at things very differently than someone who has probably done this for the past 10 years. So I would definitely recommend anyone who is aspiring to get into product marketing, have a little bit of a focused approach on the industry that you want to get into. If it is tech, if you wanted to be B2B or B2C, that would be the first thing, that try and be a little focused and not spray and pray. The second would be, I think, in brand marketing, typically you would look at brand campaigns, break it down, look at what's worked and what is not. And for a product marketer, I would say similarly, look at stories, read case studies, successful product launches and unsuccessful launches. Look at what went wrong in their messaging, positioning, play with it, and look at what you would have done differently. Do that constantly. And I feel like that would get you into the product marketing frame of mind. Thirdly, soak up a lot of content. Henry has fantastic content on his channel. Soak up yourself into what the expectations of this role would be, whatever level you're at.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you so much for sharing about your experience.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you for all the content you put out, and thank you for this conversation.